Hello, people. Um, Welcome. It's going to be a different topic today. Talk about making guitars, about making a career as a guitar maker. I titled the live stream "The Five Most Difficult Challenges in Becoming a Guitar Maker." Well, let me tell you one story first before we go into that. Okay, so when I started guitar making in the early 1990s, an experienced guitar repair specialist from Helsinki came to do a master class for us. His name was Juha Rislakki. Juha Rislakki. Same first name as I did. He brought along a guitar he had refretted, and I was very impressed with the work quality. The fret ends of that guitar were like these. See in that picture. Hello, Mibu. Hello, Damien. Hello, Shaggy's Faction. Good to see you here. Okay, this is not Juha Rislakki's guitar, but and maybe the frets weren't as buffed to so mirror-like as in this picture, but those dome-shaped fret ends were the same. And then okay, years went by, and I had totally forgotten about those special fret ends because other teachings, other teachers, other mentors were kind of stronger in my kind of mental picture in the first years. My actual teachers from the from ICAL in the College of Arts and Crafts, and so I kind of forgot about this, and until many years later. So we used to do our fret ends in our guitars more or less like normal for years and years. Nice fret ends, I think, but normal, so to speak. Until about 10 years ago, I don't know. Yeah, maybe it was 10 years ago, 12 years ago. Anyways, Antti Härmä, the guitar tech for Children of Bodom, visited our shop. He dragged in a carload of guitars to our shop, and these were the main guitars the Children of Bodom guitarists Roope Latvala and Alex Laiho were using on stage, and these guitars needed some service, refrets and such. So I picked up one of Roope's ESP custom-made ESP guitars and noticed the fret ends in this guitar. And I asked Antti, the guitar tech, a question of who had done the fretwork, and he recalled it must have been Juha Rislakki, that same guy I had met when I was studying to become a guitar maker. And I immediately remembered. I remembered the man. I remembered those fret ends, and I thought these are the same frets he showed us back then. And so after Antti, the guitar tech, had left, I took that guitar to my guys, to my team, and I said, look at these. These are the finest fret ends I've ever seen. How can we claim to make the finest guitars in the world, and yet our fret ends aren't this nice? And the first reaction within my team was like, oh man, that these would be so hard to do and it would take forever to shape the fret ends like that. No way we're going to do that. Okay. In my team, we always work in consensus rather than me pressing a view on them. I learned that that's the best way. And so I thought, okay, I'll leave it be. Until a few days later, one of the guys, I think it was Tommy, came to show me the guitar he was working on, a unicorn maybe. And he goes like, did you mean the fret ends like this? And yeah, that guitar had the same beautiful dome-shaped fret ends as Roope Latvalas ESP did. And since then we made them like that. You know, it was a notch better than before. It was not necessary to do them like that, but on the other hand, tiny little details like that can make a big difference. And the thing is that when you take such steps, when you decide to take such steps to improve, one day you might also find yourself painted to a corner. What does it mean? It means that you're doing every detail the best way you can. And this is typically a very time-consuming way to do things. So ultimately, if you're living with guitars, the question is your customer prepared to pay for that extra mile you've taken? We can elaborate on this a bit later down the road. But that's the story how we came by with the fret ends. Hey Alex, hey, Juno is here too. Juno, my daughter, is here listening. I think it's the first time, at least the first time she's commenting something. And Emma is there. Great. Hannu, hey. Great. Damien says, everybody loves the fret ends when they see them. Yeah. Let's talk about that in a while. The fret ends. More about the fret ends. So anyways, let's go now down to the actual topic, to those 5 challenges of becoming a guitar maker, of making your career as a guitar maker. So number 1, the the very obvious, the very basic technical aspect of becoming a guitar maker: how to make a guitar. How to make a guitar, understanding the fundamentals, how to make a guitar. What does it mean? Well, in my case, I took an evening course in the beginning of 1990s to make an electric guitar from scratch. It's here. I have it here. I can show it to you. It's a rarity. Not very many people have seen it. It's here. It's a Strat, sort of a copy, but with a few twists. But anyway, that's the guitar. That's my first guitar I built from scratch. By that time I had repaired a bit. I had made a couple of kind of crude guitar bodies, and in my mind, in my fantasies, I was now prepared to make the best guitar ever. The best guitar ever. And as unrealistic as such an idea may seem to you, that's the way I was, and that's the way I've always been. And I don't think I've ever cured from that horrible disease. My approach of putting all in, it's a it's a very poor strategy if you're gambling or investing money to put all in. But hey, that's me. All in. Remember those fret ends, a symptom of the same disease, I think. Well, now looking back, making that first guitar, the woodwork, getting the dimensions and angles right, the fretwork, the finish, the electronics, it's a lot to process. There are so many phases of work in there. And I think it's unrealistic to expect more from your first guitar or guitars than, to hopefully succeed in making it somewhat work the way it's supposed to work, and hope that it looks about right. I'd say in my case, considering my nitpicky personality when it comes to kind of finding the devil in the details, I was very focused in the beginning to make a detailed, beautifully crafted item that looked like a guitar. And I was a lot less conscious about the rest of the aspects that we'll talk about in a minute. And well, this of course differs from maker to maker. Different personalities. We're all individuals, except in Life of Brian by Monty Python. There's that one guy who is not, but the rest of us, we are individuals. Yeah, the world has obviously changed tremendously from the times when I was learning the craft. Back then, one of the big challenges was that the information was hard to find. There was no internet, no YouTube. Zip. Libraries might have had some books, which I all read. I read every book I could find, but it was really not easy. And nowadays the challenge appears to almost be like the opposite. You know, all the information is within our grasp. It's available from this endless stream of sources, and now the difficulty is to find and choose the good stuff. Frankly, I'm not the person, I'm not the expert to give advice to you about what is available now. I don't have the time to follow what's available now. I don't know. But I do have the feeling that a lot of the content available is sort of half-assed, half-baked. A lot of snake oil charmers around, teaching in the internet where everybody can appear an expert. There are general experts giving advice about all kinds of stuff. So what I'm here to do, I'm only here to tell about my experience. That's all I can talk about. I don't know about other people's experience in the depth that I could really talk about it much. I might occasionally refer to mentors I've learned from, but that's it. I've had many great teachers. And one of my early guitar making teachers was the famous American luthier Bob Benedetto. Let me show a picture. Okay, look at that picture. This is 20 years ago. The picture was taken at the Frankfurt Music Messe in the year 2000, I think. And I learned a ton from Bob. Not only the very pragmatic, hands-on know-how about making guitars, but also about the business and philosophy side of things. Of living the life as a guitar maker. And by the way, Bob could be your teacher too, thanks to this book. Where's the screen? Let me take off that picture. Yeah, so this book, Making an Archtop Guitar, Robert Benedetto. It's a book that was first published in 1994. Most things I've ever learned from Bob came from this amazing book, many years before I had the honor to meet the man. We've had great discussions face to face, and Bob has my gratitude and my ultimate respect. I might refer to his wisdom later on. Let's see how this plays out. Okay, the first challenge. You need to learn to make an object that looks like a guitar, plays like a guitar, sounds like a guitar. So what's next? So I've said it before and I'll say it again. If a guitar is handmade guitar by someone who calls himself a guitar maker, someone who calls himself the luthier, it does not guarantee anything. It's much easier to make a shitty guitar than an excellent one. That's a fact. There's a lot more not so great guitars made in the world than really great guitars. So if you're buying a handmade guitar, check the background of who you're buying it from. Be careful. But this is not really for now. We're not talking here primarily to guitar buyers. I'm talking to people who want to learn to make guitars first and foremost. So the next step, the next difficult challenge in becoming a guitar maker is the deeper technical level. How to make a great musical instrument. And that's a very different thing from making a guitar. What is a great musical instrument? What is an exceptional musical instrument? For me, it is a tool that inspires a musician to make music with. A tool. Like any tool. And after grasping the basics on my career, I realized really that the real challenge was not the woodwork, not the finish, not even the fretwork. I mean, it's all kind of intertwined. So you kind of keep developing. It's all connected, but the real challenge was to understand the instrument inside out in more depth. How to tell apart a good guitar, a great guitar, and a truly exceptional guitar. This process, I think, can only be successful when the player is involved. At the end of the day, it is inevitably the player that validates my work. It's the player that validates. I don't. I'm making them, but it's the player that judges whether that instrument is worth the money. So does he buy it or not buy it? Yeah. And you know, this, by the way, it's an ongoing journey. It's never ending. I'm still learning. I'm still developing with every instrument, with the help of every new musician that I have the privilege and opportunity to work with, and learning to make inspirational, responsive musical instruments. For me, the tool that I'm making, I have a certain vision of what is a great musical instrument that inspires the player. You might have a totally different type of vision that inspires a different kind of player. So, you know, don't take this too literally, but I mean, the fundamentals are the same. It's valid, I think, still for everyone. And yeah, learning to make responsive musical instruments, it has really been, for me personally, I would compare it into a long years and years lasting sort of a meditative process. And I I don't really know how to teach it. But I can say that a lot of it, in my opinion, a lot of it has to do with humility. You know, to openly surrender to the fact that I do not know everything, and that I dare also to be honest about it to my customers. So it's a two-way street. It's a two-way learning street in a way. I think that's in the very core of mastering a craft, humility. Yeah. And over the years, I've gotten tons of requests to either write a book, or more recently, maybe it's been requests to make videos about how we do our finishes, how we do the fretwork, how we make the neck, etc., etc. But that's a bit of a dilemma. I have to honestly tell you, it's a bit of a dilemma for me, because if I would write a book, if I would make such instructional videos, taking account my personality, I would really have to do it properly, because I just couldn't sleep well if I'd only go halfway. And it's a hell of a job. It's like a second job, and at the end of the day, I'm making my living with the guitars and not from teaching how to make guitars. And as everybody, every one of we're in the same boat with this. We have only so many hours available. And that is why my videos are mostly targeted, mostly made for guitar players rather than guitar makers. Because even though my instruction video for guitarists, it's not intended, it's not a sales video, I don't even see it as a marketing video. It's not intending to sell a guitar per se. It is still a service from me towards guitar players, because they are the ones, who pay my bills. So I have no expectations or demands from anyone, but there is that. When I'm making those videos and when I'm using a lot of my time for that content, there is that potential business proposition on the table that is real. In other words, I make valuable content to those who might become one day my customers. Not nearly all of them do, but that's okay. Because I enjoy this, I love to do this, so it's not a problem. But there is that difference, if you see what I mean. And when I make content for my colleagues or hobby builders, guitar makers, this two-way street, giving some, getting some, becomes more of a one-way street. Not really totally, but so much that up to the practical point of not having the time or the resource to do more of it, I just can't. And I don't know, maybe a book, maybe sometimes I thought about like a paid video course would make sense. I don't know, like something like super detailed explaining, for example, fretwork, those fret ends and everything, like in the finest detail, how to put the frets in, how to know that the fret slots are not too tight, that they're tight enough, all that stuff. There is a million details in it. I don't know. You tell me. Leave a comment. I'd love to hear your ideas if you think it's a good idea, because But changing perspective, there is another lesson to be learned from what I just now talked about that has to do with your journey of becoming a guitar maker. If you fantasize about becoming a professional guitar maker, especially. And it is time management. Striving towards doing less things so that you have more time to focus to the essentially important things that you need to do. And it works everywhere. It works in guitar making, it works in guitar playing, it works in a relationship, it works in every facet of your life. And there comes another book tip for you right here. Essentialism. The disciplined pursuit of less. An essential read for anyone who wants to regain control of their health, well-being, and happiness. There's for you folks. Read this and regain your happiness. It's a great book, I think. I've learned many things from it. For example, the fact that why I'm not making more videos that don't pay my bills. I hope you understand. And I hope you don't take it personally, because I love you people. So anyways, that's a wrap. What's next? What's the third challenge on your path to become a guitar maker? So later down the road on my career, another kind of difficulty, or I don't like to call it a difficulty. There's no such things as problems. There's challenges. So I'd like to look at them. Another kind of challenge has arisen to the horizon. When we have continued making guitars in my company, year after year, decade after decade, we've noticed that the importance of optimizing our work processes has become like super, super important. It was always important, of course, but after making a lot of guitars, one needs to find the right way to maintain the motivation at high level, and really pay attention on how to continuously enjoy the work you do. Why so? Because if you're not motivated in what you do, eventually it starts showing in the result. In other words, a happy guitar maker makes a better guitar. A happy guitar maker is capable of making a better guitar than an unhappy guitar maker. Very concrete detail, filing the nut slots. If you're all gloomy and distressed and in anguish filing the nut slot, guess if some of that energy will transfer into that guitar. And you make a mistake and you need to begin again. It takes more of your time, or alternatively, you're so pissed off at it that you don't care anymore if it's the best nut you ever made into a guitar. So it's important to like what you do. It's very important to like what you do. I mean, the way I look at it, there's not much difference motivation-wise if one works in a sausage factory or a guitar factory. Not if, this is what you do for your living, or this is what you do for your living, and there's no change. Making guitars one at a time is already a lot of this. Sanding. Sanding, scraping, 80 to 90% of the time. Different kinds of sanding and scraping. That's what guitar making is about. So for those of you who fantasize of a romantic career as a guitar maker where the lights are dimmed, that was my wife that I sent a kiss to. I can say to you guys too, to be equal to everyone. Where was I? Yeah, so for those of you who fantasize of a romantic career as a guitar maker where the lights are dimmed, your favorite music plays on the background, you carve a guitar neck in slow motion, the shaving drops on the floor and you sip from your mug. Great fresh coffee. Forget about it. That's not reality. That's not what guitar making is like. Making guitars is dusty, it's smelly, it's often very uncomfortable. In our case, we have solved this challenge by making the process as comfortable and in the worst, worst phases of work, because there are some things that just aren't comfortable, so we make them as tolerable as possible. And one way we've done, one tip, maybe this doesn't apply to someone who just begins to, starts a career as a one-man shop, because this is what you do anyway, what I'm going to tell you now. But it does help maybe when you're planning your future as a guitar maker, when you're planning, what do you actually want? What is it that you want from your future? We're not doing any serial production, even if we are a small team of luthiers working in my company. Instead, every one of us makes still guitars from scratch, from the very beginning to the very end, all the way. And this way, the work process doesn't become so boring. And number two, we take breaks. Together. 9 a.m. coffee break, together. 12 a.m. lunch break. 2 p.m. another coffee break. Working 8 to 9 hours per day. In other words, we do the best we can to make the working environment enjoyable in the long term. It doesn't work perfectly. Look, here I am, 10 p.m. and I'm working. Good God. Okay, I don't count this as work. I'm having fun with you guys. That's it. At least that's an excuse for myself for doing this. And I have to add that this philosophy, it drops in some ways to that same category as those dome-shaped fret ends. Painting yourself into a corner. It's much slower to make guitars the way we make them. It's not the most efficient way. And what does that mean? It means that it's not the cheapest way we could make them. This shows in the price tag, just like those fret ends do. And so again, the question, is your customer willing to pay for that extra mile? Because sometimes not all the extra miles are necessary, to make great, great inspirational guitars if you plan things different. So, yeah. So, okay, let's move on. I'm checking in the meanwhile if you guys have asked anything. Again, you're so quiet. I hope it means that the content is captivating and not, doesn't mean that you all left. Let's move on to the challenge number 4. How to find your very own identity as a guitar maker. How to find your niche on the market. So when I was accepted to study guitar making in the Ikalinen College of Arts and Crafts, this was in 1992. I remember the first guitar design class we had, and our teacher, Rauno Nieminen, started like he usually does, or did actually. Now he's retired, so he doesn't do it anymore. No smiling, very serious Finnish way. So he goes on with the guitar design. When you're about to design a guitar, the first thing to do is to find a case that your guitar will fit into. People, that's the extreme practical approach. Certainly, if you're about to revolutionize the guitar world, your design might require a custom case, but that also comes with a price tag. And having been in this business for 25 plus years, doing my best to make the ends meet year after year after year, Having designed quite a few different guitars, I can really appreciate Rauno's piece of advice as one of the aspects to take into account. Really, how's it going to ship? What are you going to put it into? If it's a strange amoeba kind of a thing that doesn't fit into any available gig bag or case, okay, there are custom options. So if you're ready to go that way, go for that way. Just laughing here to Mibu's comment. I'm gonna bring it in. I think it's a great case, isn't it? Yeah. Um, on a more serious note, though, I think this particular topic is worthy. It's worthy of its own book, or own video, or a series of videos, dedicated episode at some point. Finding your own identity as a guitar maker. I think I could make a topic on this because this relates to so many things. It can, in the same way, it relates to becoming a musician. Really, um, finding your own identity as a guitar maker, finding your identity as a guitar player. Um, it's such a many faceted question that it's impossible to cover it here, and it's also very personal in the sense of being intimate process. I think finding your own identity is so much about growing up as a human being, you know, finding your self-confidence as a human being, that realizing that you're good, you're enough exactly as you are. I'm enough as the person I am. So finding your identity as a guitar maker has a lot to do with that, in the same way as it has a lot to do with humility, you know, having the guts to admit that I don't know everything. I have still things to learn. I definitely have a lot of things to learn. Hey, Damien, have a nice evening, you too. See you next week. You can continue the recorded version of this till the end because there's some good stuff for you, Damien, coming at the end of it. So, um, okay, when I'm going to elaborate on this a little bit still, even though it's impossible to cover this topic. When reading daily news, it appears that we live currently in a world without values, without standards. It's a world of chaos, and it's a world saturated with the paradox of trying to save our planet and simultaneously yearning for eternal economical growth, wanting more. Well, more of everything. More money, more followers, more likes to the videos, more subscribers, more stuff. More stuff that is produced faster and more efficiently and cheaper. More stuff for me, more money for me. It's an egoistic, selfish, cruel world we live in. And that's the challenge, at the very root of it. There is no room for ego and no room for selfishness in mastering the art, the craft of guitar making. You can replace the words guitar making with any other craft or form of art you want, because it's all viable, it's all universal. You know, ego is all about wanting, and mastering a craft is not. Mastering something is about growing into, for me it is, growing into my full potential through humility, through serving others. And it's the same with making music. The fulfillment comes from giving, from sharing the mutual passion, the enthusiasm. It's not about wanting something to yourself. Okay, so we're falling deep into the rabbit hole here. Before we do, let's climb up, and I'll give you another book tip, which comes here. Wait a second. What does Shaggy's Faction say here? Ah. He says, I had been playing guitar for years, but when I went to the same school Juha did, after only a few months, I started to notice mistakes in even expensive guitars. Expensive guitars can have mistakes. Handmade guitars can have mistakes. Cheap guitars can have mistakes. Cheap guitars can be great musical instruments too, when you find the right piece. The variety in the quality is greater, but you can find nice pieces. We talked about this in that episode about, you know, buying on a budget. Watch that. You'll learn heaps about this topic. I'm going to bring another comment first before showing you that book. It's actually essential to realize our ego lies us all the time, and it's much wiser to cease to hear it. That's right, and that's easier said than done. Know it, been there, done that, and stumbling to it on a regular basis in my life. Yeah, so that book here, hey, Differentiate or Die by Jack Trout. Survival in our era of killer competition. Heavy stuff about finding your identity from the business point of view, finding your niche on the market. So we're moving on to talk about the fifth challenge in becoming a guitar maker. Maybe I should tell you how I came up with that title, the 5 most difficult challenges in becoming a guitar maker. I shouldn't tell you, but I'm telling you because it's supposedly a trick. My friend Junnu advised me that sometimes I should title a video with some kind of a number, and it's advisable to not have an even number but an odd number like 3 or 5 or 7, and say something like I did, the 5 most difficult challenges in becoming a guitar maker. The problem was when I came up with a title yesterday, I had no idea about what those 5 challenges would be. That's what I've been working my ass off today to figure out what are the challenges. So here you go. So the title was a clickbait. An evil deed from Junnu, my mentor that I'm listening to too much. It's Junnu's fault, not my fault. Blame him. Okay, so we're moving on to the 5th challenge. And it is about how to make a living, how to build a career, how to run a business as a guitar maker. Because that's a whole different perspective, whole different ball game again. Until now, we've talked about making guitars, making the great musical instruments, but how to make a living. And about this topic, there's also great books written. I might give you a book tip or two still before we're done. But let's talk about this first a bit, because the guitar and the guitar-driven music in a variety of forms, that has been my greatest passion since a young child, since a kid. That's the world I escaped into very easily from whatever turbulence and whatever hardships I had as a kid in my family, whatever happened. It's irrelevant, but that's where I escaped to my fantasy world. And in school, the margins and the empty spaces of my school books, notebooks were scribbled full of either guitar designs, okay, caricatures, lyrics for songs, logos, other drawings related to my favorite bands, artists, yeah. And I noticed that this illness of mine, this let's call it, I came up with this title, this diagnosis today. It's called the OGD, the obsessive guitar disorder, has only gotten worse with time. And from the age of 15 to 16, I've sacrificed a bigger and bigger slice of my life to the altar of guitars and music. And from the time I figured that the guitar making actually can be a profession, there hasn't been any options for me. I didn't choose it. It just swept me in from the moment I realized it's possible to study, possible somehow to become a guitar maker. It wasn't self-evident for me as a kid because I never grew up in those circles. I didn't know one single guitar maker, or it wasn't such a scene as it is now. It wasn't a genre. There was no boutique guitars. There was, of course, guitar makers, yes, but it was well hidden from a kid like me. And I love it. It's my lifestyle. It's the lifestyle I've had the privilege to share with my wife for a long time too. It's our lifestyle. And I guess what I'm trying to say is this. Building a career out of making guitars is more than a job. It's balancing somewhere between being an artisan, and being an artist. And here in this piece of information, there's also risk hidden here. When something that we love so much becomes our job, our work, our profession, what is that risk I'm talking about? We easily give too much for the craft. Why? Because it's an obsession for us. It's like, even if I wouldn't get paid, I would still make guitars, like that artist would still make paintings, like that musician would still make music. Doesn't get paid, but makes it anyways. And this is where I see a potential risk of failure. A guitar maker may, for example, price his or her work too cheap. And on the other hand, if you're a beginner, you can't really ask a fair compensation to all those hours you put into those early guitars of yours. Or well, you can, of course, but when you do that, that's when your career ends, because nobody buys. And so this is a learning process to understand that, okay, I love what I do, but I have to make a living. If I'm going to make this a sustainable way of life, I have to make a living. And I have to, okay, if I make a modest living, I have to arrange my life so I can work it out like that. The smaller expenses, the less I need to earn from it. So it's a long process. And at this point, I would again refer you to read the book by Bob Benedetto. He has included into the book Making an Archtop Guitar. This is a great book to read for anybody who wants to make electric guitars, basses, doesn't matter what instruments. It's a great book to read anyways. And he has included, it's not a huge chapter, it's short and to the point, but he has included a chapter about marketing that is ingenious, I think. Totally nuts and bolts, like just the way Bob tends to write about things that I really love about his writing. It's no romantic nonsense. It's real stuff. That's how he writes. So if you're wondering if you should spend, 20 hours watching YouTube videos and maybe getting a glimpse of, useful information on how actually to make a guitar, or to use those hours reading this book, without a doubt in my mind, I would recommend you to read this book. Definitely. Yeah. What does Shaggy's Faction say? Do you still have the guitars you made in Ikalinen? That shark guitar, maybe. It wasn't a shark guitar, it was a dolphin guitar. And it wasn't a guitar, it was a bass. And it was a lefty. It was a custom-made instrument. It was a custom-made instrument. I made in the school, I think 13 or 14 instruments, out of which 9 or 10 were custom guitars and basses to my closest friends for very modest compensation, monetary compensation, but I did it to learn and to really learn the maximum possible amount. So in those days, this school was quite different. It was the old school building where everybody, I could work there like 24 hours a day. Nobody would drive me out. There was no alarm system. So anyways, don't worry, Shaggy's Faction. The shark guitar. I have to show that to Jaska, who owns the instrument. Okay, so you're asking how would they compare to my current guitars? I've seen some of those guitars from time to time, and I think they're decent guitars. I can see a lot of things to improve, but I'm really happy to notice that they're playable instruments, and they have stood the time, these years, well, so that you can still play them. Are the finishes as nice? No. Are they? There's a lot of details like that. And as going back to that, how to make inspirational tools for professional musicians, I would say that in those days when making those early guitars, I didn't know shit about making inspirational tools for musicians. And I think, considering that those guitars hit the mark pretty well, but it really boils down to, there is no shortcuts in learning. It has to do with building that your identity. I found certain species of wood, for example, that I enjoy using and I find very responsive, like the Spanish cedar in the bodies and in the set neck guitars, also the neck made like that, and especially the combination of Spanish cedar and Finnish birch. I found these things early on in my career, and due to my personality, in kind of like I've explained, that I go all in. So when I found Spanish cedar, I was like, this is my stuff. Nobody else used it. electric guitars. Juha Lottonen, another Finnish guitar maker, is also Juha, like Juha Rislaki. Hey, all the best guitar makers are Juha. So if you're not, change your first name. Very bad joke. Sorry, I'm tired. I can't even remember what I was talking about. Yeah, Juha Lottonen. He had made one Les Paul replica of Spanish cedar, and he said that it worked well. So I kind of, that's Juha's encouragement led into me taking a step and making a few guitars out of Spanish cedar, and I really loved it. And I sold one of those guitars to Jukka Tolonen, and he really loved it. And so this was kind of, for me, all these early on events were something that I went all in, and I thought, yeah, this is my thing. This is going to be my trademark. I'm going to make guitars out of Spanish cedar. And for years, that's the only tone wood I used in my bodies and the necks of the guitars. When I had my first guitar model, the Duke, they always had, somebody came in and asked, can you make it of Honduran mahogany? No, I cannot. That's me, gambling all in, all eggs to the same basket. But okay, the great learning curve then resulted, because how else can you guarantee that your guitar will provide a certain type of, again, identity of sound, a sound that you could, after, players who are really well acquainted with my guitars, that they can recognize that this is the sound. They get another guitar, another guitar, another guitar, and it's in that same ballpark of, in that same realm of, well, let's call it the Ruokangas identity of sound in a guitar and feel in a guitar. And yeah, how else can you guarantee that you hit that mark other than building more and more and more and more guitars of that material, so that you learn the material? Because it's not homogeneous, it's not the same every time. There, if you take 20 pieces of Spanish cedar, they're all going to weigh different, they're going to kind of shave different, they're going to act different, behave different. So you need to kind of learn your materials. So that's why I have very limited amounts of, I don't accept orders with all sorts of exotic materials, tone wood species or whatever species that I have no idea about how they're going to turn out as musical instruments. I take the responsibility of that as a guitar maker. It's my, that's my job. The client can choose all kinds of options within certain parameters, and I'm very strict of those, keeping those parameters, because otherwise I cannot guarantee what it's going to be like. Otherwise I cannot guarantee, otherwise I cannot promise 20-year warranty to the guitar if I don't know the materials inside out. So after making like 1,000 guitars of, Spanish cedar, we know it pretty well. We know every piece. We know which part of the South, even though it's okay, Spanish cedar comes from South America, unless it's a planted type of Spanish cedar that we're also experimenting now with, that comes from Africa. But we know from which country, from which coast, from where does the Spanish cedar come to us in South America, based on the weight, based on how the color of it is, how the grain structure of it is. We're very particular with our Spanish cedar. It's like buying wine. what is this crazy person saying here? The 6 most difficult challenges in becoming a bass player. I will leave that for you guys to discuss. And in the meanwhile, let's look at building a career, making a living from another angle. Here you go. Let me show you this. Let's kick out this person with the sunglasses, and not from the chat, but from the picture. I'm going to bring in a picture, but I can't find the picture. Where's the picture gone? Here. Great. Sorry. Here it is. Some of you have seen this quote. I'm going to read it to you. The music business is a cruel and shallow money trench, a long plastic hallway where thieves and pimps run free and good men die like dogs. There's also a negative side. That's one gloomy picture that Hunter S. Thompson, you can Google the guy who he was. Gloomy picture that Hunter S. Thompson paints with that sentence. Okay, the guitar industry is not the same as music industry, but it is heavily related to it for many reasons. One of the most obvious being, of course, the fact that musicians are some of our most important clients. And that alone should be a reason enough to know music business a bit if you're going to make a career as a guitar maker. So people, here's another book to your reading list. Ruokangas. Ruokangas. What the music industry can teach us about economics and our future, by Alan B. Kruger. Yeah, this is heavy, heavy, heavy stuff. And you can learn a lot about how to make a living, what choices to make, what choices not to make. That's even more important. In a lot of cases, it's much more important to know which options not to take. You can read the book. We can have a book club at some point. Me book, yeah, great title, isn't it? It's a great title, and it's even a greater book. A quote from Barack Obama here in the front cover: a key voice on a vast array of economic issues. Alan B. Kruger used to be, he was the leader of the financial advisory team of Barack Obama in the times of his presidency. This guy knows about economics, and he knows about music industry because that's where he has made his career, in music industry. It's a really eye-opening book about what's going on behind the curtains, really. And okay, let's see, it's now 10:05. I'm gonna take here now one more question by Shaggy's Faction. About designing guitars, designing models, are there any rules? Can you make a Les Paul with 25.5 scale or a Floyd Rose? Tero Siroma is a teacher in the Ikalinen school. Tero Siroma says you shouldn't. Would you make a unicorn with Floyd Rose and Strat scale length? It's a good question. And I would turn it another way around. You know, if there is a demand, if there is a player, a musician who needs such a tool, it is a reason for someone to make that instrument for this musician, I think. And on the other hand, I mean, not I know Tero quite well, and not knowing this his answer in depth, in, you know, I'm just hearing your story about the answer. So I would also say that, you know, changing something in a guitar model that has the gravitas, the gravity of tradition, all those decades of this guitar becoming sort of like a mainstream instrument to certain kind of tasks, playing music, certain kind of sound, certain kind of playability, certain kind of things. So changing something for the sake of changing something is not always, I mean, I'm not in favor of that. That to me is a gimmick type of approach, that you change something just because you change something. Because there's a reason why the most popular guitar types have evolved into what they are, and why they have, you know, claimed their space and kept their position all these decades. There is good reasons for that. Okay, there are individual instruments that are not great. You know, the variety and quality can be whatever, but those instrument types, it's there's reasons for that. And so, you know, evolution, I'm all for evolution, I'm all for trying new things, I'm all for experimenting, but you can also decide to be, oh, let me see if I can find very quickly one thing. I know this guitar pretty much inside out, and I know or not, um, yeah, okay, I did find it. Okay, so I'm going to read to you Bob Benedetto's wise words. Um, Unlike most other musical instruments, remember this is Bob Benedetto talking about archtop guitar. Unlike most other musical instruments, it has been long apparent that the archtop guitar is still evolving. That does not mean every design apart from tradition is an improvement. Refinements or so-called improvements are successful only when the player is involved. It is undeniably the player who will legitimize the maker's efforts. So there you go. That's my answer to your question. Bob said it much nicer and much better to the point than I ever could. So I'm going to move on to my closing um, little piece of, you know, piece of thought, something to take home, and you can elaborate on this. Please leave your comments after the recording has been published, you know, to the actual comments of the YouTube video. Um, I'd love to hear your thoughts about this stuff. You know, some say that by reading you learn to read, by doing you learn to do, and there is a great wisdom to that. You know, reading about Making guitars cannot make you a guitar maker. Just like reading about composing music cannot make you a composer. Nothing replaces the hands-on experience of learning, whatever the form of art or craft or skill may be, you know. And we have on the internet today, these days, a lot of preachers who don't practice what they preach. And so be careful when you're, don't believe my words either. Check my background. I might not be worthy of your trust and your loyalty. Who knows? Google me. However, I've always been a reader. As you probably noticed, I've given you a lot of book tips today. And I found this reading hobby of mine is essentially important to develop myself, to understand better the world around me, to find my way in this world, to find my identity, to understand better the world around me, and to root myself in the lineage of history, both in guitar making as well as in everything else, what I do, who I am. And here, I'm going to quote once more here, Master Benedetto. He says in his book, I'm going to read from here. Bob's words, not mine. I have been fortunate and blessed to be part of a lineage of people whose values and standards rise above life's nonsense. What we do, we should do well. Damn it, I'm going to read it again. I have been fortunate and blessed to be part of a lineage of people whose values and standards rise above life's nonsense. What we do, we should do well. Talk about humility, talk about responsibility. Thank you, Bob Benedetto, for this live stream. Thank you for listening. Pooh Ninja says, a wise man once said, never trust anybody over 30. Make up your own minds. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again, without doubt. Take care, stay safe, and yeah, love you guys. Thanks for following these live streams. It's great fun.